After losing wife and uncle and the boycott of his clan, after Ta'if where they stoned him came a gift from Ar-Rahman. As he lay asleep beside the noble Kaaba in the night, he was woken by the angel and then taken up in flight. Riding on Buraq he made the journey that is called Isra, to the city of Jerusalem, to Masjid Al-Aqsa. There he led the prophets in a prayer and chose milk over wine, then ascended to the heavens for a tryst with the divine. Raised beyond the seven skies, so many wondrous sights he saw, till he crossed the furthest low tree for his discourse with Allah. Sent back on that very night, he brought a gift for his ummah. On the next day Muslims stood with him to pray their first salah. La ilaha illallah, 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 Muhammadur Rasulullah alayhi salatu. After losing wife and uncle and the boycott of his clan, after Ta'if where they stoned him came a gift from Ar-Rahman. As he lay asleep beside the noble Kaaba in the night, he was woken by the angel and then taken up in flight. Riding on Buraq he made the journey that is called Isra, to the city of Jerusalem, to Masjid Al-Aqsa. There he led the prophets in a prayer and chose milk over wine, then ascended to the heavens for a tryst with the divine. Raised beyond the seven skies, so many wondrous sights he saw, till he crossed the furthest low tree for his discourse with Allah. Sent back on that very night, he brought a gift for his ummah. On the next day Muslims stood with him to pray their first salah. La ilaha illallah, 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 Muhammadur Rasulullah alayhi salatu.
And the fact that we are pretty much, at the time when the Prophet ﷺ experienced one of the greatest and most miraculous events of his life, and that is the journey of Al-ISRA wal-MEHRAJ. So I wanted to take the opportunity today to talk about this a little bit, inshallah, and be able to appreciate exactly what a profound event this is, and really try to highlight some of the lessons that we can learn and that we can take from this. First and foremost, a little sense of history is always very important. A lot of us are aware of some of the details of Al-ISRA wal-MEHRAJ, but a sense of history to understand exactly when it occurred, and that will help us understand why it occurred when it occurred. So, when did the journey of Al-ISRA wal-MEHRAJ take place? Actually, before we even get started, let me explain the name. Because we say the name so often, so we sometimes hear people say the night of Miraj, and then sometimes we hear people saying Al-ISRA wal-MEHRAJ. So what exactly do these words mean, and what does it refer to? So there are two words in the Arabic language that are used to describe this night. The first is Al-ISRA. Al-ISRA comes from the word in the Arabic language, which means to travel by night, to make journey by night. Alright, and so that's the first word. Al-ISRA means to travel by night. Al-MEHRAJ comes from the root word which means to ascend, to move upwards. Alright, it's used in the Quran in that particular meaning as well, in the meaning of ta'arujul malaikatu. Like the angels, they ascend. The angels, they go upwards. Alright, so Mi'raj refers to the time or the place, the situation, the circumstance in which someone or something ascended. The time or the place of ascension. Now that's what these two words mean linguistically. What they refer to is this journey or this great night from the life of the Prophet ﷺ can be divided into two portions, into two parts. Number one is the journey at night from Mecca to Jerusalem. So the Prophet ﷺ journeyed at night from Mecca to from the Kaaba, Baytullah al-Haram, to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, or Baytul Muqaddas, Jerusalem. So that was the first part of the journey. The second part of the journey is when he arrives there in Jerusalem, when he arrives there at Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, the Prophet ﷺ then was taken upwards. He was taken on a journey upwards through the heavens, and eventually to the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, where he crossed a particular plane that no creation of God has ever crossed before, nor will they cross again. So that part of the journey, the ascension, is called Al-Mi'raj. So that's what we're referring to when we say the night of Al-ISRA wal-Mi'raj, or the journey of Al-ISRA wal-Mi'raj, which means from going from Makkah to Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem up into the heavens. Now to talk about exactly when did this occur. So I'll try to provide a little bit of a framework to understand exactly when it's happening, to better be able to appreciate why it's occurring when it's occurring. This was the 12th year of Nubuwwah, meaning that this is the 12th year after the Prophet ﷺ had first received divine revelation. So the Prophet ﷺ is about 52 years old at this time. He received inspiration, revelation, Iqra, at the age of 40. And so this is about 12 years after that point. Now, what we can appreciate in light of that is that the Prophet ﷺ is very accustomed to and very comfortable with revelation. And the Prophet ﷺ has really grown into his own when it comes to this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the communication with the divine. The second thing to take into consideration is, this is 7 years since over 100 Muslims had migrated to Abyssinia, East Africa, Habasha. So it's 7 years after that fact. Why is that so significant and relevant? Well, because think about the circumstances that existed 7 years ago, that there was such severe persecution and opposition in the city of Mecca, that the Prophet ﷺ was forced to tell the Muslims to leave, including his own daughter and his own son-in-law, and many other of his own family members and beloved companions and friends and followers. So this is 7 years after that fact. And exactly as you would expect, the opposition, the persecution has only gotten that much more severe. It hasn't gotten any better, it's even only gotten worse. Alright? The third metric by which to understand the placement of this night and what it exactly meant to the Prophet ﷺ was that it is 5 years since the boycott of Banu Hashim. 5 years since the isolation of the Prophet ﷺ, his family and his followers in the valley of Abu Talib. 5 years since that happened. Alright, 5 years since it started. From basically from year 7 all the way to year 10, or year 6 to all the way to year 9. So that was 3 years long. So it's been about 5 years since that had started in year 7. This is year 12 now. And again, what does that signify? That signifies once again the suffering and the plight of the Muslims. That for 3 years, they completely were forced into isolation, deprived of many of their own, basically their rights as citizens of the city of Mecca. And after living like that for 3 years, there had been 2 more years of just complete persecution, and even though they were back in the city of Mecca, but they were treated worse than they had ever been treated before. Not only that, but personally for the Prophet ﷺ, this is about 1.5 years since the deaths of Khadija radiallahu ta'ala anha, the beloved wife of the Prophet ﷺ, the mother of his children, the first believer, his closest friend and follower. And also it's been about 1.5 years since the passing of his uncle Abu Talib, who was the man who had raised him from the age of 8 and had supported him and taken care of him and raised him. And not only that, but when the Prophet ﷺ had stepped out into the community to basically start preaching and teaching his message, and he was faced with opposition, it was Abu Talib who defended him tooth and nail. This is also 6 months after the Prophet ﷺ made the very serious decision and at some level commitment to travel with his message outside of the city of Mecca. And the reason why I say that was such a commitment was because the Prophet ﷺ at some level knew that once I leave Mecca with this message and I go to Ta'if, of all places, and Ta'if was basically, they were seen to be the rivals of the Meccans. Ta'if was a rival city of Mecca. Alright, it was the second largest city, home to the second largest tribe, and there was a rivalry that existed between them. And the Prophet ﷺ knew that no sooner than I take the message there, then they're going to decide that I've gone there to try to, gather or amass an army and launch an attack against them, and they're going to basically come after me. So the Prophet ﷺ made this decision and made this commitment. And this is about a year and a half before the Prophet ﷺ, a little over a year before the Prophet ﷺ would make the decision to migrate, would follow the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to migrate from Mecca to the city of Medina. So this is near the tail end of his time in the city of Mecca. So now when we put all of this together, and I forgot to mention one last thing, the Prophet ﷺ for the last 9 years has been preaching publicly. Because the first 3 years that he received the message, he was not commanded to preach publicly, but rather he was communicating and he was talking to people that were near and dear to him, people that were close to him. But 9 years of public preaching. So when you put all of this together, what you basically understand is that the Prophet ﷺ was in a very, very difficult situation. Very extremely difficult situation. 9 years of preaching. 12 years of carrying the message. And he was met by, constant and increasingly more severe and aggressive opposition from the people of Mecca. And the Prophet ﷺ was a pillar of strength. And the Prophet ﷺ was a model of patience. But the Prophet ﷺ, this was starting to take a toll on him. It was wearing and tearing on him. It was very extremely difficult. And then when you factor in that the Prophet ﷺ a year and a half ago had lost his wife, lost his uncle, that emotionally was personally was very tragic for the Prophet ﷺ. And then when you also factor in that shortly after their passing, a little while later, the Prophet ﷺ, he goes to try to seek some type of support, some type of backing from the city of Ta'if to be stoned by those people and chased out of their town. And not only that, but when the Prophet ﷺ is coming back to Mecca, the people in Mecca find out that he had gone to Ta'if. So now Abu Jahl and all of his crew have basically started this campaign against the Prophet ﷺ, saying that look what Muhammad is doing. Muhammad has basically gone there to Ta'if to join up with our rivals, to get an army together and then come and attack Mecca. Muhammad is a traitor, wal-'iyadhu billah. He has committed treason. And they started this propagandist campaign against the Prophet ﷺ, and they basically put together a plan that when he comes back into the city of Mecca, we will ambush him. And their hope was that at the very least we will imprison him and create like a very scandalous public trial of Muhammad ﷺ, which hopefully can lead to a conviction and we can execute him. This was their plan. And that's why when the Prophet ﷺ was coming back from Ta'if, the Prophet ﷺ was met by some of the Sahaba outside of Mecca, and they said, please do not enter. This is the plan they have against you. And the Prophet ﷺ stayed outside of Mecca for a few days and sent word to some of the different leaders of Quraysh, different leaders of Mecca, because Abu Talib has already passed. That's part of the reason why they feel like they have this free reign, to see if anybody would grant him protection, saying, I am the grandson of Abdul Muttalib. I am a citizen of the city of Mecca. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran had given the Prophet ﷺ confidence, you are a true citizen of this city. وَوَالِدٍ وَمَا وَلَدٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes an oath, saying you have every right to be in this city, as much as anyone else. This city of your forefathers, just like the rest of them. Right? So the Prophet ﷺ is trying to reach out to see if somebody would grant him some protection, sanctuary, safety, immunity. And multiple people rejected it until finally Mut'im bin Adi, who did not agree with the Prophet ﷺ, he was not a Muslim, he agreed to give the Prophet ﷺ protection, and then he came and he got the Prophet ﷺ and brought him back into the city of Mecca. And something very fascinating, it's a bit of trivia, right? But it's important to know and it's very fascinating. The Prophet ﷺ, before he received revelation, he used to go to the cave of Hira, the cave of Hira. And he had gotten into the habit of going there even more and more frequently and spending more and more increasing amounts of time over there at the cave of Hira. To the point where he was, one could say that he very much longed for and desired and really enjoyed, his time there in the cave of Hira. Jabal Nur, the mountain of Nur, the cave of Hira. Because it was a place of reflection and contemplation and quietude and solitude and peace and serenity and tranquility for him. But ever since he received revelation, did the Prophet ﷺ ever go back to the cave of Hira? Never did. And we talk about it often because part of the purpose of the divine revelation and the message was that now it's time to take this to all of humanity. Now it's time to live with the people, walk with the people, talk to the people, and communicate and share this beautiful message with the people. This is the responsibility and the obligation that divine revelation comes with. It's not just some free ride on the train of guidance. You get guidance for yourself, go find your little corner and then spend your days out. It comes at a price, it comes with some responsibility. Alright? But actually, the trivia from the seerah is that the Prophet ﷺ only went back to the cave of Hira after receiving revelation, after getting his mission and his message only once. And that was at this particular time that I'm talking about, when he came back from Ta'if and they blocked him off and they wouldn't let him enter, and he needed a place to stay for a couple of days while he arranged for some protection to enter back into the city of Mecca. He needed a place to stay, he went and he stayed in Hira. Right, so once again the Prophet ﷺ sought that comfort in the cave of Hira. So anyways, the Prophet ﷺ comes back and he resumes, his mission and his preaching in Mecca, and it's worse than ever before. And that it is at this particular time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alleviates the pain and the difficulty and the weight and the burden on the heart and the shoulders of the Prophet ﷺ by taking him on the most miraculous, beautiful, amazing, unbelievable journey that any human being has ever experienced. And this journey is a form of just not him bringing back the narrative of the journey for our inspiration and motivation, and for us to learn a lesson from. And it wasn't just simply for the reason of, serving as an evidence and a proof of his nubuwwah and his risala. It is both of those things, but it was also to nourish, to nourish the heart of the Prophet ﷺ. To help him close and heal some of those wounds that he's been carrying for over a decade. The wear and tear on the person of the Prophet ﷺ. This was to help heal him. To bask in the nur, in the light of divine glory, and to be able to come back to his people with greater strength and resolve. And so this is part of the wisdom of that particular journey. Now, I don't mean to mention this in the spirit of, just a plug for the sake of a plug. I mention this because I really want everyone to understand how rich, how deep, how profound, how detailed this remarkable journey of the Prophet ﷺ is. So, as a part of our regular series on the life of the Prophet ﷺ, I covered we went through the story of Al-ISRA wal-MEHRAJ. And I covered it in about 8 different sessions. So we have nearly 8 hours worth of discussion and lecture on just the Al-ISRA wal-MEHRAJ. And all of that's available on the Qalam website. And the reason why I mentioned that is so that I want you basically to go there, download the recordings and kind of listen to them. Maybe over the course of your day, maybe while you're driving to work, maybe while you're sitting at your, cubicle just working with your headphones in, right? Just listen to it over the course of the next couple of days while we are here in the days on which the journey of Al-ISRA wal-MEHRAJ occurred. And so just listen to it over the course of the next few days. That way you get the benefit of the full details, all the reflections, all the discussions that should occur within the discussion and learning about the journey of Al-ISRA wal-MEHRAJ. Obviously tonight we have a shorter opportunity together, so I'd like to highlight a few things, a few points of benefit on the particular journey. First, I want to just lay out the basic journey, what exactly transpired. All right, so the Prophet ﷺ starts the night, begins the journey. There's a couple of different narrations. One mentions that, he was in the home of Hani. Hani was a relative of the Prophet ﷺ. One narration.
Alaikum salam. Hello. How are you?